the challenges, part of the key issues that we are seeing is in the management and financing of urban areas. In many jurisdictions, including in Kenya, where I am, the financing that goes directly to urban areas is lacking, as is the management. We see a lot of kind of re-centralization of the management of the cities to higher national government institutions, especially where in countries where it's decentralized and where we have local institutions, there is a resistance to kind of bringing together or decentralizing power from the hubs. So urban areas need distinct management, and they need specific ring-fence financing to match their needs. I think, secondly, many African countries are urbanizing fast, as you rightly noted. The three largest cities, part of the largest cities, three of them are in Africa. But the rate of provision of urban services is not as fast. So you see things like water provision, housing, and other amenities are not being provided as quickly as could be. And then third, in terms of, like, for example, I'll give a specific example with Kenya. Kenya specifically is batting below its average. Right now, its urbanization is around 27–30%, but with the gross national income of the country, we should be around 40% if we benchmark with other countries. And I think it's the same with many other African countries. So we are urbanizing fast, but we don't have the urban services yet. We don't have the management and financing, and we are not. We are essentially batting below average in terms of the urbanization rates, and that is affecting economic growth.
Thank you so much for that, Wangari. Same question to you, Steve. What's your take on urbanization challenges and the current status of on the continent, specifically being a professional in this sector, working as an architect? What's your take?
Thank you very much. My take is more or less the same as Wangari's, but extremely different, because Wangari talks about the decentralization of urban areas and their management and how the financing is not linking to development of the urban areas. What I would like to say is that urbanization by definition really borders on centralization, not decentralization. So the main challenge that we have with urbanization right now, and what is making it unsustainable, is that it is not properly planned, and it is not working on a centralization model. For instance, there's the public finance management, which Wangari works in, and already our laws in Kenya say that the public finance can only be released after an urban area has given its coherent plan and shown how it is going to use the money and for what the money is going to be directed to. Unfortunately, as it is, the finances are being released and there's no coherent urban plan. And so the money is going into people's pockets rather than developing the urban areas properly. So when the rural-urban migration happens, people come, they find money has been given, but there are no facilities for them. So my take on the biggest challenge is that we do not have coherent, integrated urban plans where we can direct our money to and where we can see impact of that money. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. Very good point. And Collins, being a Nairobian, you probably see Nairobi growing a lot and a lot of the urbanization challenges and so on. What's your take on urbanization challenges in Africa?
Thank you so much, Jonas. I think you will realize my bit of argument will be more close to Kipinji, probably because of the sector knowledge. But it's very important that this session comes just after the energy bit, because you realize that urban areas are actually in demand of energy quite a lot. Actually, almost 70% of the world's energy is consumed in urban areas. But that aside, Githinji was talking about planned and spontaneous urban areas and how probably the planning around urban areas and planning can be a challenge. I presume that should be a challenge, but looking at urban areas today, I would say that probably one of the biggest challenges that urban areas are facing today is the impact of climate change. You realize that with the emissions coming from urban areas, and actually when you look at the greater percentages of emissions that are being emitted today, about over 80% are actually emitted from urban areas. So probably one of the challenges that the urban areas are facing today is purely climate change. And looking at it, really, you realize that almost policies that are being developed or action that are being taken are in one way or the other inclined towards mitigating and adapting to climate change within the urban setup. That aside, I think one of the other challenges, or rather another challenge that probably urban areas are really facing, is we would call it probably the population pressure. But this could be a potential, but I know that is discussed later. But Wangari is talking about Wangari and Gidinja are talking about people migrating into and outside the urban areas, basically to search for the livelihoods. I'm looking at population pressure as an advantage to the urban areas, but probably sometimes a disadvantage to urban areas, because you realize that most urban areas in Africa really come as a result of the spontaneous nature of urban areas arising in Africa. So when spontaneous urban areas arise in Africa, then slum surge comes in, and that makes population a challenge. But twist that population, then it comes an opportunity. But thank you so much. I think the rest we can discuss later. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Collins. I think that's a very good point. And also something you see a lot is this unipolar effect, meaning that if you're in Kenya, everybody wants to move to Nairobi. If you're in Lagos, in Nigeria, everybody wants to move to Lagos, right? So, you know, if urbanization was a little bit more spread out divided amongst more cities, I think the burden would be easier. But if everybody wants to move to the capital, then yeah, you will start seeing these unplanned slums and in other kind of informal settlements springing up. So I think that's a very good point. But also the aspect around climate change, because something that people don't, that people don't discuss about is mobility. Yep. And looking at urbanization and mobility, and something that we all know is that, you know, spending time in traffic is not something we like, but it also releases a lot of pollution, right? So as we are living in cities, it's more traffic, it's more pollution, and additionally you have climate change. So is urban living in Africa actually good for you? Is it better to live in the, you know, on the outskirts where you have clean air and, you know, what's your take on that? Is it actually, is this something that we want to be like Africa should be urbanizing? Or should it be better be like, no, we have good weather, we have beautiful nature. Maybe it's better to look at a different kind of society structure. Yeah, this is a question for all of you.
If I may comment on that, I think, lately people have been kind of romanticizing the idea of living in rural areas because, you know, it's green and there's the quality of air and all those things that you don't find in urban areas. But the fact of the matter is it's much more expensive to live in rural areas unless maybe you're completely off the grid. And maybe even if you're completely off the grid, that means you're not taking advantage of the economies of scale that comes from urbanization and from urban areas. So I think it's important to realize or to understand that if you want economic growth, and economic growth goes hand in hand with higher standards of living, then urbanization is one of the key drivers of economic growth. And for any country to continue that trajectory, and we're not just talking about having beautiful cities, we're talking about improvements in healthcare, we're talking about improvements in in education, a lot of the social protections and things like that can be enhanced in urban settings. Rural living, as much as it looks nice, it can be romanticized quite a bit. And I just wanted to speak to the point that Stephen mentioned about centralization versus decentralization. I think in the context of, in many African countries, if you have one or two major cities and everything is centralized there, then what we were seeing is that there are a lot of disenfranchised parties in different enfranchised areas. So having decentralization, but still having major hubs through which people can access urban services, I think is important. And I think what you're talking about, Jonas, in terms of a disseminated and a more spread out urbanization planning but really instilling in that the connectivity of cities. So there certain cities can have clear niches or clear expertise and have those cities connected so that they can kind of be some sort of a microcosm or network of cities that have different strengths, but together provide reinforced population growth and economic growth.
I like that network thinking and more synergy, right? Because if you're set up as an island, basic services will be much more expensive for logical reason. I think the other thing is that with density comes economic growth. You know, when you have more people in a small space, then you will also see a lot more businesses happening, you know, and so on. So I think like you say, you know, and there's both sides. But Collins, James, what's your thoughts on this?
I don't know that James wants to go fast, but I can go faster. I think it's more of what Wangaria said, but the action behind it, or rather the plan behind it, is what determines really how the romanticization about it, or what Wangaria is describing, would be pursued. Because you realize that I know of particular cities or particular urban areas that are really trying to do what is called rural urban linkages, so that the rural areas are really linked to the urban areas, so that even if you move, and purely it's more of creation of transfer stations, if you might call them, quote unquote. So really it's more of how really are you going to link the urban areas to the rural areas, so that moving to the rural area doesn't become very expensive, because removing the rural areas are really expensive. But behind the idea, or rather the notion behind the idea, would be really how do you make urban areas rather more accessible to the rural community, through working your ways on linking urban areas to the rural areas, so there's that service. Because you become off grid really when you go to the rural area. It's purely off grid. You don't know what's going on, and of course Kenya is really trying to do all that it's doing, and other countries are really trying to do what they're trying to do to ensure that the rural areas are connected, are sort of given the necessary services to ensure that they act as mini urban areas. Of course, Kenya is trying to the county system of governance, but this is still not there. So how do we achieve that rural urban linkages, so that at least when we really talk of moving to the rural areas, or as we talk about planned urbanization, then the cost is really bearable when you move to the rural areas.
Thank you so much for that, Collins. Steve, do you have any input on this question? What's your thoughts?
Yes, I do. I fully agree with what Wangari is saying about the network of cities. That one is a perfect idea, and I actually have designs towards that. The point I'm trying to make is that Kenya has 48 million people. If you divide that into 6, you have cities of 8 million people, which are very viable cities, considering that other cities like Lagos and Cairo and wherever, they're towards 12 million people. So if you have 8 cities in Kenya, you're very okay. Disburse them properly, distribute them properly, and then have the populations concentrate there. The question you asked about mobility, again, comes towards centralization. The more you have people living densely together, the less they need to travel and the less impact they have on the environment. Also, the less their goods need to move. You're producing goods here where people are, and you're selling them there where people are. So there's less movement and there's less pollution. So we should be looking more towards densification and properly planned, coherent, and integrated urban areas. Thank you.
Jonas, if I may just also contribute to that, because I just wanted to reinforce what my co-panelists have also said. Collins did mention about the rural areas and them being associated with some of the urban areas. I think what we see typically in urban areas is you have the main urban area and then the peri-urban area, which is kind of a hybrid between the urban and the rural, where people live, where people have more space, and they do daily commutes to the urban areas. And so there's some sort of happy hybrid, but also looking at urban areas as functional places of work, of trade, etc. But then, there's the daytime population of urban areas, and then there's a nighttime population, which is very different. So there is some sort of the codependency when it comes to rural urban. It's not, it doesn't always have to be one or the other. And then one one other thing I wanted to mention, which came to my mind as you were speaking, Stephen, is about, there are different levels of urban areas. There's cities, there's municipalities, there's towns. In some places, there are things like market centers. So I think in the hierarchy of things, so for example, and I have the most experience in Kenya when it comes to this, so you'll hear me talk about that a lot. In Kenya, I think now with the new Urban Areas and Cities Act, we have about, I think, between 6 to 8 cities. And then we have another list of municipalities. We have another one of towns, and then we have others of market centers. Now, cities are 250,000 up, municipalities are 50,000 up, towns are 10,000 up, and market centers are 2,000 up. But they are all urban areas. They are all classified as urban areas. So they're just at different levels of concentration and different levels of service provision. So I think we may be concentrating our conversation on cities only, but I wanted to highlight that there are different levels through which urban services can be experienced and provided.
Yeah, just one more point. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just one more point that I wanted to make. Even within cities, we can have a rural setting, a blend of rural setting and urban setting inside the city, because you can do urban farming, and also you can do your parks and recreation areas and integrate them into the fiber of the city so that both are blended sustainably. For instance, Barcelona, the CBD of Barcelona is right now aiming at having people 200 meters away maximum from a park. So why can't we do the same in Nairobi? And since people walk and cycle a lot in Nairobi, make the cycling and walking paths inside these parks wherever they are going. And then inside these parks also have next to them the urban farms. So in essence, you're bringing the rural area right inside the city and integrating it in such a way that it works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. I see a lot of people nodding here. It seems like the other panelists agree with you. Am I reading you right? Is that a good idea?
Yes, I mean, the urban cities these days are not just concrete jungles. Urban cities these days are becoming green, lush green areas, the revival of some of the old buildings. So I 100% agree with Stephen.
Yeah, sure, Jonas. I think that's more like the explanation behind hybrid model of linking up rural areas to urban areas. It's really working. It's working.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and I'm glad also that it's working, like you were saying. Since we're discussing opportunities here, right? Maybe we can dive deeper into it. What are the biggest opportunities you see within urbanization? And what I mean with that is, so say in 50 years that we have cities that, we feel very proud of, and that, we feel like this is what we want. So basically, cities without slums, cities are sustainable, obviously water management that you were mentioning, waste management, the aspects around movability and so on. But this is a big topic, and there are many different opportunities and where you can start. So my next question for you guys is, where do you see the biggest opportunities, and where would you see more focus? Maybe we can start with you, Collins.
I think given my thinking towards climate change, emissions, and reduction on greenhouse gases, I see probably an opportunity in cities really working towards a city level climate resilience, and that particular hub of resilience in cities can be really an opportunity to tap into the cities, so that cities can really be a contributor towards realizing the country's nationally determined contributions. And you see almost the entire African continent countries are committing to the PAYER agreement under the NDC's framework. So I see cities really, and this is something that we have been trying to do as Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance through the Just Livable Cities. There's a potential in that particular venture wherein cities can really be the hub where, and you realize Wangari talked about the Cities and Urban Areas Act in Kenya, which really is now really establishing the cities municipalities. And these municipalities are actually headed by municipal boards. When you work with municipal boards in transforming an agenda on climate change or business, it really flies faster than you working with the politicians who really manage the cities. It doesn't work really well. So when you work with the, say, municipal board chairman, for instance, in Kenya, in Abuja, in Bangui, in all these African cities, it really gives you a pathway that you tend to, or rather you set an agenda, probably a goal that by probably 10, 20 years, I would want this particular city to contribute to reduction in emissions, probably by 10 or something percent, in line with our NDCs. For instance, Kenya is committing to reduce at least 32% of her emissions by 2030. How can we tailor make Nairobi, for instance, to be able to contribute towards the realization of that? How can we be able to transform Kisumu County, how can we, Kisumu City, to be able to help us achieve that, Mombasa to be able to help us achieve that? And you see, that unlocks the business opportunities in the city. How do we transform to greener energy generating sort of mechanisms? Application of solar, well-planned cities where you can use more of the solar or rather the sunlight, as opposed to electrification, for instance, of the cities. So I think there's quite a big opportunity in city level climate resilience that is still untapped in Africa, that needs to be really tapped. We have seen this when we have been running the project that I've just mentioned to you about city level climate resilience, and we are seeing results currently, and we're running this with the Frederick Ibas Stiftung first country office in Kenya. It's really giving us a more sort of way, a baseline where we can be able to explore issues like just transition. How do you provide probably improved cooking stoves to communities, so that at least the emissions are lowered? So it's a sort of a low-lying fruit. But if you look at it in terms of just climate change and climate change mitigation adaptation, you don't see it until you dive deep, and then you realize that, okay, when we act on this particular issue of climate change mitigation adaptation, then it widens the base area where you can venture into businesses, you can venture into distribution chains, and so many other things in urban areas. Thank you so much.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Collins. James, same question to you. Where do you identify big opportunities within urbanization? Oh, hi. Could you hear me on that one, James? Ninji?
Sorry, Jane?
James.
Oh, James.
Ah,
we have
Ninji.
Stephen.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Stephen. God, sorry for that. I just got mixed up. I even have my colleague looking at me. This is what happens when you're moderating too many panels. It's just like, oh. Sorry for that, Stephen. I really apologize for that.
No problem.
In terms of opportunities within the urbanization sector, where do you see opportunities, Stephen?
I think the biggest opportunity is production of what I spoke of earlier, the coherent integrated urban plans. Those ones are not there. So even if we do the small projects, we change the cooking style, we change the method of commute and all that, but the city is not integrated and it's not coherently planned, it means that on the larger scale, things are not working well. So what Africa needs to aim for right now, and especially places like Nairobi, is transit-oriented design. This means that you orient everything as much as possible to public transport. Then after that, you will link that public transport to non-motorized transport. Then after that, you link the non-motorized transport to social housing. So that when you integrate all these things, you have the mass of the people living very close to where they work, to where they school, to where they go to recreate. So you minimize the movement of the people and the goods that they trade in. The main thing that Africa needs to aim for is not mass rapid transport. We shouldn't aim for that, because that is what is being pushed globally, the BRT, the light rail and all that. We should aim for reducing instances and distances of travel. Make everyone live so close to where they do all their activities that the first thing they need to do is not move at all. And if they need to move, they're moving using NMT, which is non-motorized transport, or PSB. So that's what I think is the biggest opportunity in Africa, to do the coherent integrated urban plans, which, by the way, are there in our legal system, only that we don't do them. So let's aim to do them. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I think that sounds very wise to do it. Do you know why it's not being done today?
Yes, I do. Because they're called County Integrated Development Plans, CIDPs. The law says that no public funds should be released to any county unless they submit this CIDP. But what is happening right now, funds are being released on plans that are not well done. So there's no incentive to do good plans. But if we start from that point whereby we say no funds will actually come and every plan has to be peer reviewed, not publicly reviewed, peer reviewed by professionals before funds are released, then it will mean the planners and the policymakers have to do good plans before they get the funds. But if you give them the funds first, regardless of the plan they give you, you'll never get good plans. So let's tighten the threshold and say your plan has to achieve A, B, C, and D before you get the funding. Then everyone will have to up their game to do the good plans.
Thank you for that. I think that's yeah, that's very well put. Thank you for this. Wangari, same question to you. Where do you see opportunities within urbanization? Where would you like to see more focus?
I think just to react to what my panelists have spoken about, I think it is quite interesting. I think my ideas are in line with them. Just reflecting on what Stephen was talking about in terms of living close to where you work, and I think that would be an ideal situation. I think if we were able to do that, that would be absolutely awesome, because the commute times are too high, the congestion is too high, the opportunity cost in terms of time spent in traffic is too high. But then if you look at where we are right now, in many African countries, we are, pseudo obsessed with building these big super highways. That's causing a lot of, that's taking a lot of the budget pie and the revenues that we have, which is why we're also getting into a lot of debt. And the big question is, how do we rethink this? Because I think it's historically, a lot of countries have equated development and urbanization in these big super highways. But is there a better way? Is there a way to create small urban hubs? As we talked about, we said there are different levels of urbanization. Within the urban centers, within the metropolitan centers, is it possible to have micro or ecosystems where people live and work and trade and do all their get all their social amenities, but within a larger kind of metropolitan region? I think we're starting to see a little bit of those microcosms coming up in some countries. But if I say in Kenya, we have areas like Kitengela, Syokimau, Kikuyu, areas like that are little hubs, but we still are really highly reliant on these big super highways and are investing a lot in those big super highways. So to some extent, there is will continue to be some thinking around, we need mass transit systems to get people from point A to point B as we start to evolve urban areas. But talking to the question you raised, I think the main opportunities we have, because Kenya or a lot of African countries have urban areas that are not at advanced stages of evolution. We do have an opportunity, much like the digital sector, to leapfrog into what is a sustainable urban setting. So we don't have to go through the slog and the processes that all other countries went through. We can immediately say we want greener cities, we want parks, we want to live in urban area, we want to have a 5-minute commute to work, 5-minute commute to get my groceries, 5-minute for entertainment. And so we can immediately leapfrog into that just by, through strong policy planning, through good spatial planning and the like. So I think there is an opportunity that we have right now. And I think also married to that is the fact that we are also, a lot of African countries are thinking about, what's the next step from from agricultural based economies, and that's to more manufacturing and industrialization. And if we're going to be doing that, then how can we do that sustainably? To Colin's point, how do we then build cities that are climate friendly, that don't have a lot of emissions, and still be able to progress up the economic growth scale to be high income, middle and high income countries? How do we do that, but look at that sustainably? And then looking about the opportunity, with the larger African continent. As you know, we're not very well connected. The cities, different African countries themselves are not very well connected. But now with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the agreement that has come into place at the beginning of this year, there is now opens up an opportunity for different countries to be able to increase trade with one another, and to integrate more closely. But in doing so, we need to make sure that there's going to be a lot more labor flow. There's going to be a lot more, not just intra-country migratory patterns to urban areas, but inter-country, I guess, between many countries, people moving to different countries to work. So I think there's going to be an opportunity there that we need to take advantage of now and put into our policy now. We also need to respond more closely to citizen needs. Big slum areas is a big example of cities not responding to the composition, the demographics, the fact that a lot of people move from rural areas to urban areas and are not able are not earning enough to live in those urban areas. How can we find a better way? And I know UN Habitat and different NGOs are thinking about those types of things. And I think there is a new way. We need to also take that opportunity to leapfrog into that. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is really the idea of the pandemic. The pandemic has really shifted our thinking in many ways. And how can we as African cities also look at that and say, over the pandemic, a lot of us were home-based. We started to grow this kind of home-based economy, where before we were going out to get things, but then now it switched over the year, and now goods and services are coming to us. Delivery services, food, entertainment, summits like this are now happening online. How do we then take this into our strategy and policy and formulate our planning to grow our cities and urbanize our cities against these new ways of thinking?
Thank you so much for that. I think you lifted up a lot of good options and many different ones. So really appreciate that. I see that we are soon running out of time. So I just want to jump into a bit where I will ask you questions, but I want like short and quick answers. So my first question is, what role does technology have? What role can technology play to make the urbanization sector more sustainable? Maybe I'll start with that one, Collins. Do you have any quick answer to that? Or is there any specific technologies you see could help? What's your take on that?
Yeah, sure. I would be doing an injustice if I didn't mention the role of GIS as a technology in urban planning. You realize that Steve was really talking about the issues of CIDPs, but CIDPs really come after the spatial plans. The problem is in Kenya we like shortcuts, so we'll do a CIDP before we do a spatial plan. But really, spatial plans should shape the direction of the city. It should shape the orientation of the city. It should shape everything in the city. So then you realize that when we do CIDP, for instance, for Nairobi City County without a spatial plan, then we give money to do things that we really don't know what they're really planned or rather they're going to do. So yeah, there's a really high potential of technology in shaping urban plans, especially in generation of spatial plans, guiding the directions of the city, the orientation of the city, and the movement of the city. And really, we as Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance have like a sort of we work in thematic working groups. So we have one on technology, knowledge management, and capacity building. And that particular technology aspect is the technology thematic area is really just trying to come up with the spatial plans and of course not really, I would say, official, but we are trying to do that aspect of participatory planning through technology. You say the short answer. Sorry, it took quite a bit of time.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, if you look at urban planning and this kind of, strategy or planning kind of documents, software works really well. And you can visualize it, you can capture a lot of opinions. Many of these software also allow end user perspectives. So you're not, designing the city as like a dictator, but rather that you're doing it, with the end user perspective in mind. So I think they make the process more transparent and more democratic, and hopefully will lead towards better outcome as part of what money is being used for, and also the planning. Same question to you, Stephen. What role do you see technology playing in terms of making the urbanization sector more efficient, sustainable, or what does it have a role to play there?
apart from the urban plans, I believe technology will minimize movement and maximize integration and trade, production, and consumption. What Wangari was saying earlier, what Wangari was saying earlier, from your computer, you can easily tell what is supposed to move where and who you're supposed to interact with without leaving your house. So that makes urbanization very nice because you can be many of you in a small area interact without having to crisscross the city. And the less you crisscross and the more your production is, the more sustainable you are. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. Same question to you, Wangari. What's your take on technology's role in terms of urbanization?
I think the first step of technology, and I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is access to the internet and access to things like Wi-Fi. In urban areas, it's much easier to provide. And I think that is a backbone of being able to provide more technologically focused services and to enhance service provision through technology. We can also start thinking about the services that can be provided using technology, online services. We're seeing a lot of shop fronts now moving online. We are not using a lot of physical spaces. Office spaces are starting to be disrupted. And so I think that's also something to consider. And then lastly, I think in terms of, I talked earlier about leapfrogging, the aspect of artificial intelligence, AI. How can that start to be incorporated in urbanization thinking? How can factories also start to use AI? What does that mean for the education shift? What do people need to start learning in terms of trade and skills to be able to take advantage of a more technologically focused world?
All right. Last question to you. Thank you so much for that, Wangari. Last question to you is a yes or no question. Okay. Will the journey towards sustainable urbanization be smooth or a bumpy road? Collins.
It will be bumpy. It will be a little bit bumpy.
What kind of bumps are we going to hit on the road?
Urban areas are consistent of, or rather constitute both informal and formal sectors. What is happening in Kisumu County, or rather Kisumu City currently, is they're demolishing some pathways and trying to do what is called urban renewal and urban regeneration. A lot of fights back and forth with the county government and between the county government and the informal sector. So the road is bumpy because there's a bit of resistance. There's always a bit of resistance when you want to bring something new. So expect a bit of not really smooth running, but you will encounter some bit of resistance, especially for people that depend on this informal sector, for say the border guys. I don't know whether that's what you call them, the people that do or rather sell street food. So expect a lot of resistance from those people, but the more engaged, the more sort of involved they are, the better for us. So that when we are doing this, they really know the direction we want to take, where we want to reach, and the objectives we are trying to fulfill.
Yeah, and I mean also the cities are for them, right? So in the end, you kind of want to create cities, build cities for the people. So I think that's good. Thank you so much, Colin. Stephen, for you, bumpy ride or smooth ride?
Bumpy.
Bumpy. Okay. The bumps.
Yeah. The bumps, it's not the low income people who are benefiting from the slums and all that. It's the high income people. So before you convince the low income people that they are prey, they're not the predators, they're actually the oppressed, and that they deserve a better way to live, before you convince all of them, it will be a bit hard. And also before you convince the high income people that they need to let go of the easy money they're making out of the low income people, you'll have a very rough ride. So the easiest way, the most effective way is to try convince the masses that they deserve a better city. So it's still bumpy, but that's the easiest way to go.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Steven. Same question for you, Wangari. What's your take on this?
I will agree with my panelists. It's definitely going to be bumpy, and only because reform is bumpy. And if we go the direction of trying to chart our own way forward, our unique path forward, because we're not right now. What we don't want is just to copy paste what has happened in other jurisdictions, because that has gotten us into the problems that we have right now in terms of pollution, etc. So charting a new way forward is going to mean bringing different heads to the table, listening to different voices, and coming up with new ideas that need to be tested. And that is definitely going to be ground for contention, but ground, of course, for something that's going to be fit for context in terms of the African cities scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Wangari. And I think that that's a very good final point also. We need to modernize, not necessarily westernize. And that copy pasting what people are doing in Europe or Asian stuff and thinking that this is what we need to do in Africa is not necessarily the right approach, but rather, defining our own journey. Obviously, we can learn from best cases and we can study what's happening, but in the end of model and what works best, I think it's a local perspective, right? End user perspective. Is that the message? Perfect. With that, thank you so much. I want to thank the fantastic panelists that's been joining us. Collins, Stephen, and Wangari. You've been fantastic. I really like your viewpoints. I really like some of the stories you shared, some of the examples, your honesty around this. And for everybody that's watching live on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, thank you so much for joining us. And that's it for now. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hey, Nich.
Hello, Ripi.
How are you?
Nasema, unanisikia?
Unanisikia vizuri?
Nakusikia poa wewe?
Niko poa. Hebu call Timo mwambie ache mchezo, mwambie get on.
Sasa si ndio organizer.
No, mimi nauliza, wacha siasa.
So acha receive call kwanza.
Few minutes.
How does it look so far, Wega? Oh, we're still live, huh? Hey, everybody on Facebook, on YouTube. And we're still